we're here. Honestly, technology, you got to love it, haven't you? Yeah, StreamYard balked on us, and Joel and I have been here sweating and frantically trying to go, what's gone wrong? So, we're here. Right. Apologies for the late start. If you've been patient enough to join us, fabulous. Thank you. So what are we going to talk about? Because we're going to go back to the future, although I think it's just the future of the future. What are our planning priorities for next year? So welcome. I'm Katy Howell, if you didn't know that, and I'm here with Joel Harrison, who's editor-in-chief and founder of B2B Marketing and soon to be author of an upcoming book on B2B. Thanks for joining us, Joel, and sorry about the slightly stressful stuff.
Oh, Katy, don't worry. Technology's got amazing ability to let you down when you absolutely need it the most. It was beautiful because we were just literally about to go live, weren't we, when it went? I was just like, not 5 minutes before, we've been talking for 10 minutes. I just thought, no, I'll get them when they least expect it. Yeah.
Just, my heart rate is like through the roof right now. But anyway, tell us a little bit. I can't imagine there's anybody on this that doesn't know who you are, but just for the benefit of those that may not. Joel, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'd like to try and know as many B2B marketers as I can, but you can't know everybody. I'm founder and I'm now called editor-at-large of B2B Marketing, b2bmarketing.net, with the guys who run the B2B Marketing Awards, we run Ignite, we run the ABM conference, we do loads and loads of stuff in the market. We used to be B2B Marketing Magazine, times have changed. And we now run a community called Propolis, which is the center of our business. We set up 20 years ago, and we set up into a place where there wasn't anything in B2B marketing. You know, if you were around in the early noughties, if you picked up, it was everything was kind of dominated by the magazines. There were like 14 marketing magazines. You picked up Marketing and Marketing Week. You never seen that B2B. It was as if it wasn't there. And we now know it's kind of at least half the global economy, if not more. It's ridiculous. It shows how unobjective and biased those organizations were. So we will launch into a market where there was nothing, and we're lucky in that some lovely people like you, Katy, who kind of coalesced this kind of market as kind of, we help catalyze this market developing around us, and now it's really popular. People identify as B2B marketers. There's loads of vendors and agencies in this space, and it's a really rich, vibrant environment. But we like to say we've done our bit, in helping spark something and then provide something to people to coalesce around. And for 20 years for me, it's my kind of life's work. I'm so passionate about it. I love it, and I love watching it evolve and watching it get better and more serious and more effective over the years.
And you still are the center of quite a lot of B2B marketing, which is fantastic. And you say, I love the fact you talk about the passion, because I also think you have this very unique view of B2B, because in a way, everything sort of funnels through you, just what's going on, what's happening, all the interesting things. And that's really why I got so excited about having you talk to us all, because I think next year is going to be quite pivotal. I think next year, things are really changing in B2B. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of chaos in that opportunity. We've got inflation impacting budgets. We've got technology advancements, and dare I say the word AI. We've got changes in strategy, and we're trying as marketers to navigate this landscape and bring our leadership team with us. It's kind of hard to see what we should be doing. So my first question, before we get into the meat of planning and thinking about the future, is something that will happen in the future, which is an upcoming book by you. And I wondered why, given all your experience, you were inspired to write a book about B2B, and what you want to talk about. What was your inspiration?
Well, I mean, Katy, I'm really lucky. Thank you for everything you said. It's really, I'm really flattered by plaudits, right? And I'm trying to do my job to represent the industry. That's really what I see my job, being the honest broker. I mean, I'm really lucky in a position whereby, given that how our business has changed, I'm not required. For many years, I was chief product officer, I was chief content officer, I was chief customer officer, I was chief events officer. I was pulling all the levers. It's exhausting. I wasn't really very good. It's impossible to do all those things well, but got a situation now in B2B marketing. We have an excellent CEO in Richard O'Connor, who is just doing phenomenal things for the company, and he's given me space to step back. Dave Rowlands, who's head of content, who's doing similarly, well, head of product now, I should say. So he's doing a great job. So I've got this opportunity to step back and be out in the market, and I wanted to evolve from being someone who was kind of influential to being someone who was like a thought leader, who had because I've got a lot of opinions and knowledge about a very broad breadth of things, but I haven't got a great deal of depth in anything. So I thought, well, I really wanted to get really down into the depth of something. I'm also, I'm a content person. I was fancied the intellectual exercise of writing a book, and I wanted to track where B2B marketing was changing. So I've got this opportunity, and everything seemed to align. So it's great. I said I was going to do it, and now I've got to get on with it. I was very conscious in saying, giving myself a challenge to the market, and I've got to crack on now.
Oh, can't wait, to be honest with you. We need it in B2B. We need pragmatism and insight from people like yourself. So I'm delighted, absolutely delighted. So let's get into the first meaty question. So having witnessed many trends, you've seen them all come and go. Could you identify what consistently works in B2B marketing and what often fails?
What consistently works? Well, I mean, looking at some data, I mean, one thing I've been doing recently is extracting loads of data from our awards entries this year. And one thing that you can see that came across really strongly that really was very validating was a balance of there's been a lot of noise in the market about you've got to invest all your money in brand's where it's at, everything's on brand. That's not true. And we can see that from the data. It's about a balance between brand, yes, and you have to express and understand your brand and communicate it well, but it's about having a demand engine view of that. So it's this balance of, but also overlaying that, it's understanding that people engage at different levels. So having that balance of marketing stuff that plays to the longer term, the bigger picture, but also plays to engaging people, and creating calls to action and helping them along that journey and understanding the complexity of the decision-making unit. That's important too. So you can't trade those things off. So that's something that really annoys me. But I think so that balance is really important. I think the other thing that, again, we can see it in the data. I think that, and this is hard, and we were talking about this beforehand, but I do think good creative does generally make an impact, right? Or great creative makes an impact. So you've got to push yourself creatively. So I think there is so much Me Too content out there. One of the challenges inherent in that is, okay, how far can you go? How far have you got a license to do? There's all kinds of stuff packed up in that. So I think that having that balance, I'd say that the two things which are omnipresent is that balance between brand and demand and trying to push yourself as creatively as much as you can. And I think the one person who exemplifies that for me is Brian McCready of Adelshaw Goddard. Brian always says, if I'm not feeling uncomfortable, I'm not doing my job properly. And I make the comparison between, he would love this, I know I said this before, it's the David Bowie thing, right? It's the if I'm not changing, I've got to push the boundaries of whatever's happening. I've got to not stand still. And I think that's really, really vital. So those are the two things I'd say.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I know we're going to talk a little bit later, but to be creative, you need to know your audience. And I have been both pleasantly surprised and also horrified at how little is known about buying behavior in different sectors. Varies per sector, but actually how little is known about the audience that we're targeting, the customers. And right now, I went to Andy and Luann's B2B Social Day forum. I probably said that all back to front, sorry. And it was really interesting because the one thing that comes out of all the conversations I had is that our buyers need to trust us. And that, for me, next year has got to be a big part of this trust. So that's definitely a pointer I've got as a trend that's been bubbling and bubbling and bubbling and bubbling. And I just think it's going to be centre point next year.
I think so too. Yeah, I really agree. Sorry, I cut across you there.
No, please do.
I think there's so much noise in the market that having a relationship with a brand, understanding what they stand for is really important. I think that trust is critical. And Katy, you teed me up to talk about the topic of my book, and I didn't take that opportunity. So my topic is going to be on thought leadership, and the reason I'm doing that so there you go. We circle back on it. Is exactly that point about trust. It's about, and I think there's some great research by Man Bites Dog recently. There's loads of great stuff on thought leadership out there. But one of the things they were saying is that, business executives really value information from trusted providers. It's a mutually reinforcing thing. In this world where we've had disintermediation, where there aren't so many trusted sources, there's all this noise, all this social noise everywhere, and some of it of dubious, origin and actually grounding. To have, when you have a relation with a brand that you really trust, that you understand what they stand for, that's really powerful. And I don't think it's a choice not to do proper thought leadership these days. That's why I'm writing about thought leadership. Oh,
and as you know, with me, a very hot topic. Indeed. Let's just back up a little bit.
Sorry.
I'm just going to look at stats. So Gartner reports showing that 82% of global B2B marketing decision makers are really quite bullish about the increased investment they're going to get. So 35% of B2B marketing folk think that they're expecting a budget increase of 5% next year. Is that a good thing? Or is it just going to get sucked up with inflation? And what should marketeers prioritize?
Well, I think budgets come and go, don't they? I kind of think, and the, small increases, make a difference. But I feel it's always a perennial battle. I don't think much has changed. We're always trying to look for efficiencies. We always look at how we can be better, be more effective. We're always, and AI is very much in that conversation right now. But I think we're also looking at how we can have most impact for our budget, whatever that might be. And that means probably moving away from those kind of random acts of marketing, which is all too easy to get sucked into, and doing things that we are perhaps politically required to do within the organization, which we know probably aren't going to have much impact or apropos to the bigger picture. So I think that's really where the kind of the progress we need to make. So great if we get some small budget increases, but I think that there's a longer term transition that we need to make. And in Propolis, which is our B2B marketing community, we've got a big message around being a commercial marketer and what that actually looks like. We've got a great diagram about all the skills that you need to be truly commercial. And an aspect of that is, and this is something that's been bubbling under, and I was so delighted the great work the people in Propolis did. Shane Redding and Scott Stockwell particularly did some excellent work on this and really formed this. About how you it's not just about how you communicate with the board. It is about that. It's about having the nuances at all aspects of what you do to be commercial, to be able to drive that forward, and then understand how marketing engages with it, and not get stuck in a marketing silo to see the bigger picture. So I think yes, I'm really optimistic about the future. There's huge opportunities for marketers. I think B2B marketing it goes from strength to strength. I'm just constantly impressed by it. But at the same time, a small increase in your budget isn't probably going to make that much difference. It's about learning how to align better with the business and use your existing resources better.
Yes, and I think with so much going on, we got into I don't know if you agree with me, but I felt we got into a habit after COVID where we all rolled our sleeves up and kind of got into the detail of not standing back. And I've been ranting for the last couple of weeks now about planning and how important planning is, and having some focus, because not only is it great for you and your team to know where you're heading, but for me, one of the bigger challenges is now letting your leadership team know that's where you're going and stop derailing us with your random ideas. Love leadership teams. Okay, so please do ask questions, guys, who are watching live. We'll endeavour to answer as many as we can. But before we do, I'm going to most of this conversation is just about B2B marketing, except for this one, because I have to ask about social media, because it seems to me lots of B2B marketers have put social media top of their list of tactics for next year, which is, you'd think would be great news. Is it good news, or is it a total nightmare? Does it indicate a move towards relationship building or more crap content? Sorry, I can't think of another way of putting it, but you know what I mean. Too much noise.
Unoptimized content, perhaps we could say, rather than crap. But I agree. I'd probably call it crap as well. I mean, sometimes I guess it can be. It can be great, and it can be awful, because it's a spectrum like everything else. it's one way of being very tangibly visible, and that is again good and bad. I think that social media used well is incredibly powerful, and I think we're beginning to understand much better about how to do that. I think you've got to give credit to LinkedIn and how they're evolving their platform, and some of the things they're enabled. And they talked a lot about influencer marketing, which I think we might talk about a bit later on, but stuff like that is really good. But if you can do social media well, if you can do it in a considered way, you can build it as part of a considered, coherent process. If you can align it with thought leadership, if you can align it with influencer marketing, if you can use the advertising opportunities around it, great. But just more noise for its own sake, no one will thank you for that. You'll get drowned out. I really think that, to your point, trust is going to rise to the top next year. Quality is going to rise to the top as well. It's just not about saying just pumping up more and more stuff. It's about having messages that are coherent and consistent and engageable, alignable with. So yeah, do it, but do it well.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Trust, quality, but there's one other bit, which is that social is a kind of all the funnel. If you start to think of it as all the funnel, you can actually work it better, which is you want to look at some of your content being trigger content that will get attention, the typical adverts, look at this, that, blah, 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 shock, horror, let's look at this. And also what's called pre-influence, which I'll talk about another day because it's a great long subject. And then what you should be doing is looking to nudge nurture. And as LinkedIn says, it's 5 to 9 touch points to a action, but it's actually more like 30 touch points to get a proper lead in through the door. So the reality is you want to be nudge nurturing and then having a value exchange. We all know about the gated content and its poor performance over the last 18 months. Is your content has to be damn good. So all of that requires intense thinking. Again, now's the time to think about it, think across the year ahead, line it up to the pain points, all that sort of good stuff that we're used to doing. I just feel like this is the time to kind of get ahead of yourself.
Absolutely.
But social is not the only tactic. And last week, I think it was, you were at the ABM conference, and I wanted to talk about ABM because it feels like, I think the first event I ever went to of yours, which must have been about 10, even 15 years ago, a B2B marketing event, you talked about ABM. It was really new. Oh yeah, still talking about ABM. Is it a good thing?
Yeah, definitely, it's a good thing. I thought, I was one of the people. So we'd worked out. We did our first ABM conference 9 years ago. So it was 9 years that you must come to that conference.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But it, I thought this is going to be a couple of years and we got to do something else. But it keeps going. And this year we had our biggest ever ABM event. We had 600 people there, which is just phenomenal. Wow. And some of this data we pulled out from the awards, ABM is actually twice as effective as non-ABM marketing. And given we're in an environment actually where things are slowing down, ABM is not a quick win. ABM takes time to deliver. That's phenomenal statistic. That's amazing. That really boggled my mind when I saw that. So yeah, it is really powerful. LinkedIn Institute have tried to call it something else now. It's like they're trying to reinvent the wheel for its own sake, which is just bonkers. ABM, all the different flavors of it, having that depth of, as you said at the beginning there, about depth of understanding, really understanding who your customers are, what it is they want, all the different personas. That only adds to your effectiveness as a marketer. Aligning with sales, really having that proper cohesive dialogue and shared engagement is critical. So for all of those reasons, it's really vital. Of course, it's not relevant for everybody because there are mass market activities where you're talking to sole traders, very small businesses, where it's not really relevant to do ABM, and there's that blurring of boundaries in programmatic, what's programmatic ABM and what's demand gen. I try not to get involved in that conversation, but I think when you're doing complex products and services with very high ticket values and multiple decision makers, ABM is just the logical choice because it is difficult to do it, and you're not going to. And all those reasons you mentioned earlier on, leads. As I think someone at Trend Dreamer, whose name escapes me, was saying, leads are no longer the leading indicator. By the time you identified somebody, they're probably a long way, if not pretty much, already made the decision. I completely buy into that one. So ABM allows you to do that because you're identifying people and focusing your again, as you said, limited marketing budget around those things.
Did you see anything that stood out for you at the event that you thought, gosh, you know, because there's all sorts of different flavors of ABM, isn't there? People do different versions. Is there any kind of thing that you thought, oh, that's different?
Well, I wrote a blog about it afterwards. My thing, the thing that came out to me most of all was about, often people talk about ABM. This is a tactic, and this is, you know, it's an alternative demand generation. Actually, it's not. Really, ABM is about transformation. It's about marketing transformation. It's revenue transformation, because it works across the piece. It gives you the license, the need, and the opportunity to re-engineer or reimagine your whole revenue journey. And that was confirmed time and time again by the speakers we had. So we had some phenomenal speakers there. Ryan Ullman from Henkel, Ollie Hamal from EY, and James Houselander from HP stand out particularly for me in those in that conversation, talking about that transformation that they've made, that moving towards ABM has allowed them to do, and how that had changed that nature of that conversation that they had the rest of the business, and empowered marketing. And that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, it sounds fantastic. And I think it is going to be one of the elements you can use as a game changer for next year. You know, if you're not doing it, or if you are doing it, do it better.
Yeah, but sorry, Katy, caveat,
yeah.
Don't just embark on that journey like, oh, it'll be great, you know, we'll do ABM in 6 months' time, we'll be learning. It's more complex than that. Talk to Robert Norham, who's our ABM trainer. He'll give you that our ABM course about starting up is a great way to understand what's required, because it's not easy, right? Nothing that's ever easy is ever worth doing, I don't think.
No, and a lot of B2B marketing isn't easy, but it's very satisfying when you get it right.
Absolutely.
So we touched a little bit on content here and there throughout this chat. And there's a really interesting piece of work by Peter Field that says dull doesn't sell. And it should all be about pushing emotional and fame-based ads to the forefront. But, you know, B2B marketeers, can they really pull off that kind of consumerish stunt? Can they do this? I'm being controversial because I have views, as you know. But are they compromising on professional decorum?
Well, look, I get a bit annoyed that Peter Field gets credit for this, because this conversation's been going on for a lot longer than when Peter Field briefly graced us with his presence in B2B and then disappeared again. You know, people like I defer to people like Paul Cash, you know, who wrote a book on humanizing B2B. That's the trend, right? That's what we're talking about. Emotion's been, you know, and LinkedIn Institute started talking about this recently. It's been around. There was a presentation I saw in the US in about 2006, 2007, which had a great chart where it showed the level of emotional engagement with B2B brands versus B2C brands. And it showed that the B2B brands were far more engaged emotionally. Your connectivity with those brands was vastly different. And at the time it blew my mind, but then you think about it now, it's like, well, you know, if you don't, they listed all these brands. If you go to CVS pharmacy, they don't have your brand of shower gel. That's annoying. But if Deloitte mess up your audit, you might go to prison, right? So, you know, it's just like, you know, it's incomparable.
Yeah.
So of course you need to be emotional. I think B2B marketers are getting it. It's hard. And you get lots of pushback from the organization. People expect it to be logical. They expect to be features led. But I think that the general trend is getting in that direction. Can we ever be exactly like consumer brands? No, we can't, because it's different. Can we adopt a more consumer way of talking about things? Yeah, inherently we're doing that over a long period of time, and that's partly just because of the generational shift that's going on. You know, like Katy, you and I remember a time when it was all about how many widgets has my server got in the advertising and trade press. You know, and thank God that's gone. But and we're moving to this world, but there's still a long way to go. And actually, it is a moving target as well, because cultural change is ongoing and buyers are shifting all the time.
I thought at your B2B Ignite event, Dentsu B2B did shared some survey data that they'd done in the industry. And there was one point which kind of left me slightly open-mouthed, and that was that the drivers to purchase in B2B had shifted so much from being the professional drivers to the personal drivers that now personal drivers outweighed professional drivers for the first time ever. So in other words, we're worried about our jobs. Buyers are worried about their jobs. They're worried about it. I'm fascinated by this.
I think, and that's a great report, by the way. Superhouse report is excellent. So if you haven't seen it already, go and download it, because it's really, really good. They covered a load of ground. They've really invested that's a great example of thought leadership, right, from Dentsu. So well done. But this again, there's nothing new in that, right? And I align that again. This stuff from 2006 was all about that level of emotion involved in that. And I think it's the behavioral science stuff, right? That's where that clicked for me, and that came in. People like, well, Rory Sutton's obviously the champion of it, but Chris Wilson did a great job talking about that as well. And it's this notion that people will make a decision based on a set of emotional criteria, and then post-rationalize that around a set of rational criteria and say that's why they made the decision. They didn't make a decision because that was the best solution for them. They made this decision because it was most functionally rich. They made it because that was the one that was least likely to get them sacked or maybe look an idiot in front of their colleagues, right? So it's all about emotion. It always has been, and I have to rein myself in to remember that some people haven't been there for 20 years and going to all these conferences that I have, but it's always been there. There's nothing new in this. But we've all got to learn this is true. It's fundamentally true.
Yeah. And we need to be able to persuade the wider organization we work within to accept that, because they are often not at the front end. Yes. I mean, we keep coming back to this, but that would be, we need to not allow, creative by committee, which ends up being so washed and rinsed that what comes out the other end is bland and pointless. And I think therein lies some of the challenges that our CMOs face in the current climate. So yeah, risk aversion, interesting amongst buyers, definitely. And I'm with you. This is not a new thing. And yes, Peter Field has jumped on the bandwagon for a bit and gone away again. By the way, another person, you mentioned Rory, and I was going to say there's another book that is absolutely worth reading, and that is by Richard Shotton, and it's The Choice Factory. Honestly, it's just such a joy to read, but it's why we make decisions, and it really applies in B2B. So definitely worth a read if you fancy that. Right, we have to talk about AI. I feel that's all we ever do these days. But anyway, so we've got AI and machine learning, and it feels like B2B marketers, apparently 87% of marketers surveyed said they're testing AI. So that's pretty good. It means that it's not being ignored, but is it really going to help? What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, it's really interesting. Actually, the ABM conference, we could really see this coming alive. You had a year ago, you had people going, "Ooh, there's this thing," and there's a little kind of random act of testing. Now, most presentations could actively say how they'd used it in their marketing, which is great. But I mean, when you sent me this question in advance, and I was thinking about. You had Tom Head on your LinkedIn Live recently, didn't you? And Tom's great. And Tom did a session for us a couple of years back about Web3, actually, and that shows how fashion oriented marketing can be. And Tom's point, which was absolutely brilliant made at the time, was like talking about Web3, was saying that in Web3 terms, 2023 or 2022, whenever it was, it's a bit like what 1995 was for the internet. Right, we can't really conceive as humans about what that transformation looks like. We're just starting to deploy it meaningfully, but we're at the very, very early foothills of that transformation. And I see it as it's a bit like the different tiers. And these are not the only tiers. The ones that obvious to me, having done a couple of roundtables on this. The first one is the individual experimentation, right, improving my processes. The second then is structural reorganization. So actually somebody running the marketing team is going, okay, we then need to redeploy our resources in a different way. And it's not about saving costs. It's about getting more out of what existing resources and skill sets, or that might require reskilling a little bit. And then the level above that, there's a product level engagement with AI, and we're starting to do that as an organization ourselves in a way that it's kind of crept up serendipitously. Unless you're experimenting with that, you can't understand the opportunities.
And one other part is number crunching. So where data is really important, that the speed at which AI can help you, depending on which type of AI you're using, but in terms of looking at where there are changes to intent data, purchase data, what the journey is starting to look like, all of these things are really fascinating. How we'll plug them into the everyday is evolving, but I think you can see the opportunity, as you rightly say, in little bits. And I love the analogy that it's like early 90s, because I remember when we were still on dial-up and trying to fathom how to use Flash-based websites that would do all these whizzy things that we loved that we never see anymore. So what was at the beginning is no longer at the end.
Tom had this amazing bit of video, and sorry, it was at the conference. It was Bill Gates on Letterman. Bill Gates looking about 5 years old, talking about the internet and trying to explain to Letterman what the internet was in 1995. And it's hilarious in hindsight. It was quite funny at the time. It was hilarious in hindsight because Bill Gates going, well, you can watch a baseball game, and Letterman's like, well, you can watch that on TV. And he's like, yeah, but you can record and watch it later. He said, have you heard of a video recorder? And that was the best he could do to explain the internet. That's what, like in 1995. Yeah. I think that's where we are right now.
Yeah. Love that. And it also makes us all feel like, we'll all get there because we did the internet. So, right. So we've covered, there's one element we need to cover. I kind of touched on it when I talked about AI and data, and that is the story about the fact that we are losing cookies, whether we like it or not, on whether Google does it or not. The point is that the cookieless future is here. And for a number of us, including those involved in programmatic, but also how we collate data and what we do with it, is throwing things in the air. Because when we focus on demand gen and lead gen, from my perspective, the biggest challenge that is out there for marketeers is quality data. So how do you think B2B marketeers should adjust their strategies?
Well, yeah, it's a really tough one, because I think we all agree that you want to have information about your prospects and customers. But I think I refer to the earlier point about leads not being leading indicators anymore. They probably already got on that journey. So I think that I don't think you should necessarily stop doing that. I think we have to accept that this ship has sailed to a certain extent, and it's about they recognizing that buyers will do most of their research offline, or at least in incognito or invisible mode, and they'll raise their hand when they're good and ready. So and I think that what you want to do is to speed their access to content as fast as possible. So putting gates have to be used under extreme caution, as you indicated earlier on. So yeah, and I think this is where things again all comes back to thought leadership. You want to have a dialogue and have respect and have people following your organization. They can do that in incognito. You want to be able to use thought leadership to challenge people's expectations and understanding and present problems where they perhaps didn't realize there were problems, and put your brand in their mind. And then when they understand those things, when they are ready to buy, they will come to you.
Yeah, and I think if you are going to use sort of advertising and programmatic, which of course to do is really start to look at the efficiency of the data that you're collecting and how you're moving it from that third party to first party. To how are you collecting your own data? How are you beginning to understand your audiences better? It's less of a challenge in social, where we have walled gardens, but outside of that sphere, it is a little bit Wild West still, and I think there's a little bit straightening out that's going to happen.
I think little bit is an understatement. I think we're going to do some lead generation work, because it's something I've really ignored, and it just amazes me that there's still this huge amount of money being spent on lead generation, and again it goes back to the thing you said at the beginning about how the commercial team, the CFO and the CEO want results now. They want results tomorrow, and they think, well, why didn't you go and do the thing which is going to invest some money in something which is going to, you think is going to drive a result? But investing money in cold data is unlikely to do that. So there's a lot of misconceptions going on there.
Yes. Yeah, I read something the other day that nobody is asking about the quality leads. They just want the volume. So it's just the number, which sort of is just, mud at a wall, as they say. Anyway, don't get me on this. No. I want to go back to something you said at the beginning about thought leadership and influencing, and talk about influencer marketing in B2B, because is it effective? Does it bring the authentic? Is it the same as, somebody who, on my TikTok is selling me more makeup or lipstick that will make my lips really big, or, or is it just another buzzword in B2B? Is it the same? What's your experience of influencer marketing?
Well, so my experience of it, I think it is something that it's a really now trend. It's something which is, I have lost count of the number of times over the last 15 years people have said influencer marketing a breakthrough in B2B, and it never has. But there seems to be a critical mass of people talking about it to make it successful. And the technology's evolved to a point where it's possible as well now. You have things like the LinkedIn platform's evolved in a really positive way. Does it work? It certainly can work, but I don't think anyone can claim to have completely nailed it yet. I mean, but it is about trust, as you said. It's all about trust. You're looking to work with people who have trust or reach that your brand might not have, and can bring different perspectives through objectivity. And I feel a bit like, as a recovering print journalist, I feel like influencers can bring that objectivity back into the market in a way that perhaps has been lacking through the kind of change in the media landscape. So I'm quite positive about it. I think the Ogilvy did a piece last summer, I think, where they were kind of saying, they kind of described the influencer world, and it kind of describes the kind of media PR world really largely to me. They're basically taking, it was new light through old windows to a certain extent, but then the windows have changed, so I don't think that's necessarily terrible. So yeah, I'm quite positive about it. I'm quite excited about it. I think we're going to see more of it. We just got to, that's why I'm positioning myself in that space, because I already kind of do some of that stuff already. I just haven't actively called myself that until about 6 weeks ago.
I think, and I think you're spot on. I also think that marketeers need to be aware that in B2B, they need long-term relationships with those influencers. We're always saying it in consumer, but it's the same in B2B. And making sure you're lined up with your influencers so that you can have that long-term relationship. And then I think it works brilliantly. Exactly as you said, you've got a third party speaking positively, hopefully, about you, but also adding the value of that thought leadership that you talked about, which you can bring together. And on that note of thought leadership, because I know we started late, but we are running a little out of time. So I just wanted to skip. I was going to talk about video, but let's just go on to thought leadership, because particularly if your book is going to take a little focus on this, I think I'd love some ideas and tips or anything that you thought interesting, even if it isn't directly out of what the book will be, but things that you think, this is what made me focus on thought leadership.
Well, I think the reason I want to focus on it is because a few things. One is that, as I've mentioned right at the top, there's been this tussle for a long time between brand and demand, or really it's been people who sell brand and advertising guilting everybody else that they're doing demand generation. It's been like brand shaming, essentially, which drives me up the wall, because, as I said before, actually what we can prove is that it works if you do them both together. It works better if you do them both together. So there's part of that, and the thing about thought leadership is it's got the ability to sit in between brand and demand and do both, and then actually also then play a role through the full funnel all the way through to sales enablement. And there's not many things out there you can do that. It's the archetypal big long idea. You have to invest in it and properly and consider it. It has to be robust and thought through. It's more than just creative platitudes. It has to be really, really in depth and well argued and well considered. So it has all kinds of implications across all kind of areas, and I think that's great. It's also content, which, given that I'm a journalist, it's my happy place. So that's good. And the problem with just back to the other point about brand, the problem with people saying, well, you've got to invest your money in brand, that's very loaded, right? A, evidence suggests it's not going to be successful, and B, doing brand-based campaigns, only brand-based campaigns, gets you into trouble, gets you into conflict with the CEO, because who owns the brand, right? So you've got that kind of, what should it look like, who should express it, all those challenges around associated with that. And also, marketers, as we know, have to demonstrate effectiveness, otherwise they're going to be out of a job. So if you're going to do something, you're going to spend lots of money on something which isn't going to prove effectiveness for an indeterminate period of time, how long is the B2B buying cycle, then you're undermining your own career. So therefore, I mean, my kind of suggestion with this is that that thought leadership is something which can sit in that chasm, can play to both brand and demand and all the way through the funnel, and means you don't have to mess with that big problem, which is brand. You can do something. But the other thing is it's complicated. It's not easy to do. And I like complicated things because I'm a geek.
Yes. And it requires people to change practice because you're inevitably, as a marketeer who might be leading a thought leadership program, having to work with people who maybe are not marketeers, but subject matter experts. And that is in itself quite an interesting change for marketeers who have been quite used to sitting behind computers and bashing away at the tasks in front of them. This is a slightly different, almost veering into coaching as well as marketing. So it's a new space.
It is new. There's all kinds of implications around it, and it's fascinating. I think there's so many opportunities from it. So yeah, I'm excited to get stuck in.
Me too. Listen, thank you so much, Joel. That is fascinating. I feel like we've covered loads, which is sort of everything from more budget. If you're lucky enough to get more budget, it doesn't mean things are going to be rapidly better. You still need to look for efficiency. So start to look at your planning in a more pragmatic way. We've talked about ABM, which is definitely something you need to look at in terms of doing seriously. Sort of social and content about, I'm halfway through writing a post about how you need to go slow on social, because I feel like we need to slow down before we go out there. And then, onto thought leadership. There's lots for us to start to think about how that mix will, fill the spectrum between a little brand and demand gen and all the bits that fit in between. If anybody gets it right, share it with us. Because it still feels very complex, but that's been fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you to our audience. We are likely to have one more live before the end of the year. I haven't fixed a date yet, so I'm so sorry, but I will come out and pester you all. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, please just ping them. I will share them with Joel, and we can always come back on the comment section. So please do. Thank you very much. And yeah.
Thanks for inviting me. It's great.
Thanks, Joel.
Cheers.